Welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. This week I have a special guest host with me, Bryan Null. Bryan is a longtime friend of the show and a longtime friend of ours, period. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So excited to have you back again. You've been on the show, I don't actually know how many times over the years now, quite a few, right?
Yeah, I've lost count. It's been
Yeah, I
fun
have
over
too,
the
but
years, but and in different incarnations of technology. So this is my first time joining you via Zoom. I'm very excited.
yeah, it is. Yeah, you've been to the very old studio at CCTV back in the day, I think, maybe even, and then the new
Yes.
studio, and now via Zoom. So you've been with us for all the incarnations of Real Film Snobs. So, Bryan, just for those who haven't been watching the show for the last 18 years, shame on them, maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself and specifically some of your favorite films of all time.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I'm a longtime fan of the show as well as an occasional participant. So it's really nice to be here as always. I have spent a lot of my life as a part-time amateur writer about film, and you can find some of my writings about film at b-nobody.com, where some of my favorite films are written about. I'm just a film lover. We've seen many films together. I miss that very much, and I look forward to watching great films together with you in the future, Angela. Some of my favorites, one that stands out is In the Mood for Love. Wong
Mm.
Kar-wai's film is one of my all-time favorites. And of course, at one point we argued about another favorite of mine, Funny Bones, which is
Oh, yeah.
close to the top of my list.
I know. We reviewed it on the show many years ago, and then I didn't like it, which is hard when it's one of your favorite films of all time.
Yes,
But
yeah, but that one sticks with me for some reason. I'm a big fan of Paul Newman. My first favorite film was Cool Hand Luke as a kid, and then I love Nobody's Fool. Those are probably two of my favorite Newman films. And then I vacillate between putting Rear Window and Vertigo in my top 10 from Hitchcock, and I usually
mhm.
land on Rear Window just because of the great outfits that Grace Kelly wears. That puts it over the top. But
Okay.
I love Rear Window very much. And then I'm a Wes Anderson fan, and my favorite of his remains Bottle Rocket. And similarly with the Coens, the Coen brothers, one of their early films, Miller's Crossing, is one of my favorites. So, oh, and I love Charlie Chaplin. There's tons of Chaplin movies on my all-time list.
What is your number one? You mentioned right before we started taping that you just did your top 71 films of all time list. So what is your number one?
Yeah, my number one on that list. Well, the number one isn't ranked, but I do note on the list that I wrote them down in the order that they came
Ah,
to my head. So
okay.
that will tell you something about what my number one probably is. And In the Mood for Love is the first film on that list. So I would
Okay.
probably in this moment I would call that my favorite, but I love all of the 71 equally. My highest ranking Chaplin on the list is The Circus, which is not everyone's favorite, but it's the one
Well, that's an interesting one. That's not usually cited as one of his top ones. That's interesting.
yeah, I love that film. I think it has his best comedy for sure.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on the show once again. We're going to review four films this week, and I picked two, you picked two. We had a little negotiation back and forth. It was fun. So a little bit, mostly newer films, I guess, and then one that's a little bit older. So I'll just kick it off with the first one, which is One Night in Miami. This is Regina King's much celebrated and acclaimed, I think, directorial debut. And this is an account of a fictional account of the night where Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke, Jim Brown, and Malcolm X all spent a night together talking in a hotel room. It takes place right after Muhammad Ali, who was then Cassius Clay, had just won a major game. Do they fight? Major fight. And so they're all chatting in a hotel room, and all these issues come up, including the civil rights movement, their roles in it. And there's in particular a lot of tension between the Malcolm X and Sam Cooke character as they both see kind of their divergent roles in the civil rights movement. This is partly based on a true event. There is evidence that these four gentlemen did spend a night together in a hotel room, and nobody knows what was actually talked about. So this is a fictional account based on a play, kind of imagining what would they talk about. Probably in real life, it was much more boring. They were probably talking about, wives and food and sports and who knows what, guys would actually talk about. But in the reimagining here in this fictional account, it's of course much heavier material and kind of their role as Black Americans during that period in 1964. And so there's just a lot of weightiness to it, as well as some very humorous moments. The four actors that play these tremendous historical figures are all really, really good. What was interesting to me, and I'm really curious to get your take on this, Bryan, is Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Sam Cooke, whose performance has been, I think, the most acclaimed in terms of the awards shows, at least so far, out of the four men. It's also the one who resembles his character the least, I think, physically at least. His voice, on the other hand, is amazing, and I'm guessing that's one of the reasons, as well as his acting ability, that he was cast. But this is actually one of the few times where the real life person is actually much better looking in terms of just classically handsome than the actor playing him. But what Leslie Odom Jr. does bring to the performance, of course, is he does his own singing, and he sings quite a bit throughout the film, and he has an amazing voice. And there's this great tension between him and the Malcolm X character. Malcolm X, who is pushing Sam Cooke to, be much more political and put that much more into his music. He feels that Sam Cooke is missing an opportunity to really speak to people during a really important time. And Sam Cooke is pushing back, saying, I own the rights to my music. I own the masters. Nobody else does that. I'm in charge of my own economic destiny. That's my contribution. And so there's this tension with them. So I really enjoyed this movie. I'm curious to hear what you thought.
Yes, I enjoyed it very much too. I think it's an excellent debut from Regina King, who's one of my favorite actresses. And the screenplay by Kent Powers and her direction is so well organized. That's what stood out to me at first. I mean, the film opens with four vignettes of each of these characters having a troubled moment. Essentially, Cassius Clay is knocked down in a fight. Um, we see Jim Brown having a very uncomfortable racist encounter with somebody that he cares about. Malcolm X has just found out that Louis X or Louis Farrakhan is not going to join him in leaving the Nation of Islam. And then Sam Cooke has this disaster at the Copacabana. It opens with that. And then the film, without giving anything away, closes with all of them making pretty important decisions in their life based on those vignettes and on what has happened in this film. And I just think the organization of that is spectacular. It's good stuff. I too really like Leslie Odom Jr. in this movie. He is able to act while singing, which is something we see in Hamilton from him quite a bit too, and he carries that over to this film beautifully. I think an unsung performance in the movie is Aldous Hodge as Jim Brown, and probably
really
one of my only criticisms of the film is he seems underutilized. I think we get to know Jim Brown the least of these four characters, and I wanted to know a little bit more, in part because of that performance, and in part because I have always been curious historically about why Jim Brown did what he did, leaving football at a fairly young age as the best in the game to go to Hollywood. And I don't think this film gave us any further insight on that. Not that it has to, but I was curious about that. I think it evolves. It starts out feeling like Malcolm X is going to be the speaker of the film, like his method is the way. And by the end, it's revealed that there are many different methods for working toward racial equality. And I think that's another compliment to Kent Powers and Regina King and their organization of this film.
Yeah, I agree with you about Aldous Hodge, who's also a phenomenal actor and actually one of the only actors in here that I was actually familiar with ahead of time. And so just a phenomenal performance. And ironically, he's the only character, real life person who hasn't, that I'm aware of, had a full biopic already done on him.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
going into this, you think, okay, there's been several movies about Sam Cooke, and I think there's 2 or 3 just on Netflix alone. Of course, Muhammad Ali, quite a few films about him, fictional and documentary, and Malcolm X, obviously, films about him. And Jim Brown is the one I really knew the least about. Because I haven't seen a movie just about him. And so, and his life story was interesting to me. And the fact that he did, give up professional athletics to go into movies. I mean, they talk about it a little bit, but I would have even, like you said, seen more of an exploration of that. Maybe it was just that he thought I should go out now while I'm, at the top of my game. It's not exactly clear, but the weakest character to me in the movie, and I'm curious to hear what you think, but to me it was Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, and one of the reasons why, as I think, as I was watching it, I thought I think I was maybe influenced by all the films I've seen about him, including, Rumble in the Jungle and When We Were Kings, which are documentaries with the real Ali, where you see him he's such a charismatic person and so fiercely intelligent. And that was what was missing to me in this movie. Now, I think this is set a little younger than those documentaries where they took place in a little later part of his life, but he comes off a little bit in this movie like kind of like the young guy who isn't quite sure what's going on compared to the
Yes.
other 3. And that didn't seem like Ali to me. I mean, when you see him in Rumble in the Jungle or When We Were Kings, he's so fiercely intelligent. Yes, he's a showman. So they got that part right. The show off, the cockiness, the like, I'm so pretty, which he is, but all of that they got that part, but he quite a bit of the time is just sort of like, trying to kind of appease Malcolm X and Sam Cooke. And he doesn't really have a lot of his own political opinions or stances on things. And that I don't know, it didn't ring true with the Ali that we've seen, I think.
Yeah, they sort of play him off as a peacemaker in this film, which is unexpected when we
Hmm.
know Ali's at least public big personality. Um, and I think maybe part of that is his age. He's 22 in this film. The character is, and so maybe he hasn't quite matured into what he wants to be. The other piece I wonder is he's at a pivotal point in his journey of faith. His decision in this film is about whether he will publicly announce that he is joining the Nation of Islam. I would hope that would be an introspective journey, and it seems to be for him. But it's not as filmically exciting when you're
Hmm.
having that introspective journey. So, and it does stand out because of all of the emotions in the room. His seemed to be a little bit one note. I did enjoy his performance, but I think maybe that's slightly underwritten, or maybe it is just a function of his age at that time.
Yeah, it was hard to tell. And it's such a great film that I hate to slight it in any way, but those little things are what kept it from being like a perfect film for me, because there's so
Yeah.
many things I did love about it. I'm a huge fan of Sam Cooke's music, and all of these people. And of course, the issues they're discussing are, of course, still relevant today.
Yeah.
And so there's no, and that I found fascinating. And the fact that they kept it interesting while it's really just 4 guys talking. They open it up, it is based on a play, and so it is mostly in the hotel room, but there's, when they go up on the rooftop in that one scene, they do try to open it up a bit outside kind of the confines of a stage play. So I enjoyed it. So I'm giving it 3.5 stars.
Yeah, I would probably do something similar. I tend not to give half stars, so I'll give it 3.
Okay.
And there is one backhanded flaw that maybe knocks it down a little bit to me, and but perhaps it's a compliment at the same time. There's an excellent coda to this film, um, but it comes a couple of beats too soon for me. And maybe, like I say, that's a compliment, and that I wanted to be in that room with these four characters a little bit longer.
Hmm.
Um, and so that speaks to how high quality what leads up to that coda is. But it does happen too fast. I mean, as I'm watching this 2+ hour film, it feels rare to feel like, oh, it's ending already. And I had that
Hmm.
feeling here. So
Yeah,
I will
it's
give it
interesting.
a solid 3 stars with a shadow toward 4.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
All right. Our next film, I'm very happy to talk about is Small Axe. And Small Axe is an anthology series that takes its name from the Bob Marley song with that same title and the line, "If you are a big tree, we are the small axe sharpened to cut you down." Um, Mangrove is the first film in this anthology, and it's the story of a West Indies community in the Notting Hill district in the late 60s in England. Um, and a restaurant called Mangrove that serves as the social center of this community. After repeated raids by law enforcement of the neighborhood and this restaurant, a protest is organized, a peaceful protest against this police brutality. And unfortunately, violence breaks out at the hands of these law enforcement figures. And 9 people from the community and the restaurant are arrested, the Mangrove Nine. And the rest of the movie tells the story of the court case where they're trying to prosecute the Mangrove Nine. Angela, we are taping on Bob Marley's birthday.
Oh, wow.
So it feels appropriate to ask, is Mangrove as a film sharp enough to you to make some cuts in that tree Bob Marley speaks about?
Well, I have to say, Bryan, that this is part of a series of films that Steve McQueen has done, available now, and they are all part of the Small Axe series. I believe they take place with different characters in different time periods, but all focused on this West London community. I thought this was a phenomenal film. I love Steve McQueen's films in general. He's never made a bad film, in my opinion, which is he hasn't made a lot, but he hasn't made a bad film. I was a bigger fan of Widows than a lot of people in our group of friends. And so that's sort of an ongoing joke, I know, with like Chris Andreessen and some others. So,
Yes.
but Steve McQueen just knocks it out of the park here. This is based there. A lot of this film is a trial, and that actually surprised me a little bit because I thought, oh boy, a trial movie. But what he does so great is he really introduces the characters early on, so we get the sense of them. The restaurant owner in particular, I thought was Frank Critchlow, who he just wants to have a restaurant for his community that has the kind of food they like to eat, so not British pub food. He tells the cops multiple times when they come in and try to order like chips, fish and chips or something. He says, "This is spicy food. This is not your food." And they get really angry at him for just existing. I mean, just for being there. They're raiding his restaurant. And so I thought that was a phenomenal part of it. And then out of the 9, he really focuses on a few of the characters in particular, including, of course, Frank, the restaurant owner, and then Althea Jones, who is an activist who is involved with the Black Panthers. And she becomes kind of, in my opinion, one of the most interesting characters in the movie, just a really fierce activist who is standing up for not only herself, but for future generations, and really sees this as a longer term fight with the police. And so, as is typical with the Steve McQueen film, the photography and the acting are just phenomenal, pitch perfect, in my opinion. So I'm excited what you thought.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I love Steve McQueen minus Widows as well. I'm on
You
the
didn't like it at all?
No, I liked it okay. I had high expectations for it, as
Okay.
I do with Steve McQueen, and it didn't quite fit with those. This film, however, does. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was incredibly scripted, well acted. Sean Parks plays Frank, the character you talked about earlier, and he has a couple of scenes in this movie that just break my heart. They're so well written and performed and shot that I loved it. I mean, if heartbreaking is something you can love. Yeah, and Letitia Wright as Althea Jones, and then Malachi Kirby as Darius Howe are the 3 characters that I see it focusing on, and I think that they're amazing. This is not a story that was familiar to me, so I was very happy to have come upon it just for my own education. And the beauty of having someone like McQueen direct a film like this is you could call it a courtroom drama, which it is, but high quality talent behind it, it becomes a work of art. And there are a couple of nods in this film. One I have have repeatedly thanked you for over the years. I think there's a nod to Killer of Sheep, which you introduced me to many years ago, as the film opens with the children playing amongst the rubble in their neighborhood as if it were a
Hmm.
playground. And it feels very much out of that Killer of Sheep film. And then a later beautiful shot that reminds me of the end of The Immigrant, where um, the Darkest Howe character is at home with his family, his partner and their child, and they've just had a bit of an argument, and his partner and the child retreat to the kitchen, and he stands up, and we see what looks like a family portrait almost, with just his image in the mirror and his partner and their child in the kitchen. And it's beautiful, and it also marks sort of the turning point in the court case, because he has a revelation in that moment that really turns things in terms of the credibility of the police in the trial. I won't go into any more detail than that, except that it involves an excellent looking artistic ruler that is a great prop in the film, I think. And another thing that Steve McQueen does very well is populate his films with beautiful sets. And this film is no exception.
Yeah, there's some great sets, and one of the things that he does that's really that I found really interesting is, I mean, I get, part of it is for us as I think Americans, the British justice system, and he's really there's some really intricate parts of their legal system that are very different from ours. And so one of the things that I learned that, so I like it when I learn something new when I watch a movie, and I was not familiar with the Mangrove Nine, but one of the things I learned is that when you're several of the characters decide to represent themselves, so decide to decline legal counsel and represent themselves legally. And the young attorney who's helping some of them says, "Oh, this is a great idea because you can cross-examine, but I can't." And I thought, "Oh, that's weird." so
Yeah.
so apparently in their system, the defense attorneys cannot cross-examine, but if you're representing yourself, you can cross-examine. And the characters you mentioned, Althea Jones in particular, and then the other one whose name I didn't write down, but he's one of the other major activists who represents himself. They use this to great advantage to try to catch the cops directly in their lies. And I thought that was really, really well played out and very tension filled. One of the things I'm really curious, I'm excited that this is a whole series because I'm excited to watch the other films to see how it progresses, because I know there's supposed to be one later on that's set in the more modern times. And of course, West London, as you said, Notting Hill area, everyone thinks of Notting Hill and the Hugh Grant, Julia Roberts movie. Notting Hill is gentrified a lot and has become,
Yeah.
a much, I don't know, swanky is the right word, but I know it's changed quite a bit from when this movie was set, and it was primarily an immigrant community, but he's showing those roots in that. The other thing that I think is really interesting about Steve McQueen taking on this material is that he is a British citizen, but he's known for doing these American films like 12 Years a Slave. And um, you don't really think of the Black experience in England, because we've watched so many more stories of the Black experience in America. And so for me, it was just phenomenal to get to experience that.
Yeah, and you're right about the British judicial system. This is a good kind of primer for that. And one thing that we get in American trial films are a lot of movement, because the lawyers can walk around. And here they essentially everyone stands in one place, and he does a great job of creating drama without movement, which I thought was great. And he does it a lot through audible things like shouts from the gallery,
Hmm.
and just even through dialogue and emotion from the characters. And I think that's quite a feat. I did want to note he gives this film gives me one of my favorite quotes of the year, which is when they're talking about Frank, that this man's blood runs purer than politics. And I thought
Oh,
we need that on a poster, the blood that
this
runs
man.
purer than
In
politics.
politics, yeah. And Frank is one of the more interesting and explored characters because he is really the one that's the most reluctant to get involved, really, even in the march, even though the march is about his restaurant, because he's
Yeah,
just the whole reason he opened the restaurant is he had maybe had some trouble with the police in the previous place he had, which was, I think, more of a bar. And he was just like, I just want to have a restaurant. I just want to serve good food and serve the community. I don't want all this fray. He's not trying to be a big political figure, hero, civil rights activist. He really doesn't want to do it. He ends up just sort of being, history sort of forces him into this role.
Yeah, he
And I
just wants
really
a
loved that.
restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, really, he's not asking for a lot. I just want to have a restaurant. It's very small. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
unassuming. I just want to have a restaurant to serve food. And nope, the police just harass him and then harass his kid. And that's the part where I think for him, the rubber hits the road. His son, who is getting beat up and harassed by the cops just for, running to the grocery store for his dad, just because they know that that will get to him. That's where they really make, I think, a huge error and really crossing him. So yeah. So how many stars is this one for you, Bryan?
I would give this film 4 stars. I was very excited about it. I think I mentioned to you earlier, or maybe I didn't mention that I watched this one twice, right in a row.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to make sure I caught some of the beauty of it that I may have missed the first time.
Well, I'm super excited. Let me know if you want to watch some of the other ones together virtually, of course. But I'm really excited because the
Absolutely.
second one, Lovers Rock, is the one that's made all the critics lists. So I'm super excited to watch that one. Fortunately, I think we're out of time and we didn't get to 2 of our movies. So I think we're going to continue this. I think we're going to have a part 2 again. I've been doing this a lot lately, but we had such a great conversation. I didn't want to stop it. So check out the next episode where you'll get to hear more reviews from Bryan Null and myself. As always, you can check out our reviews on our website, realfilmsnobs.com. If you're watching on YouTube, just click that little bell and subscribe, and you'll get updates when we have new episodes posted. I'd like to thank our fantastic crew in absentia and Brad Wortman for taping us. I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors and make sure to listen to us on KMuse, Scan in Silverton, Cam in Corvallis. What am I forgetting? Facebook and Twitter, we're on there as well. So check it out there. Thank you to my fantastic guest host, Bryan Null, for joining me. And as always, have a great day and great movies.